Cinetec is next up. I'm Nadine Blaney, joining you from AusBiz. Cinetec is a diversified technology design and development growth company providing environmentally friendly and energy efficient engineered products and solutions for global markets. Cinetec's patent pending lead product, which is a composite dry powder, provides a quick, effective, and affordable way to process water-based oil and gas sludge into non-polluting, high-strength building materials. Cinetec is also developing highly precise marine LNG metering products called custody transfer systems, and is currently assessing additional green technologies as opportunities for growth through some new partnerships. So we've got presenting Michael Carroll, who is the MD and the founder of Synertec. He's got a breadth of experience across the Asian engineering market. And just a reminder to anybody who is joining this presentation, we will be holding a Q&A session at the end, and you can submit your questions just by ticking on that Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. I will see you in about 20 minutes or so. In the meantime, I'll throw it over to you, Michael Carroll, MD and founder of Cinetec.
Thanks very much, Nadine, and thank you everyone for your interest in our company. I'll move through at a pretty brisk pace. There's a bit more detail in these slides than I will talk to, but happy to take questions, as Nadine said, at the end. So I suppose just a bit about Cinetec. We see ourselves, as Nadine said, as a technology developer, but we develop the technology through our engineering base. We've got a considerable multidisciplined engineering base, and we focus on the critical infrastructure, energy, and the regulated industries such as pharmaceutical and defence. I suppose one of the things I did want to point out is that we're not a startup. I founded the business in 1996, and we've generated over $100 million of revenue since 2014. We listed on the stock exchange in 2017 to really leverage the technology development that we were self-funding up until through our profit center, which is the engineering capability. And so we thought that was an opportune time to list and really develop some great technology. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot of our customer base. So for a relatively small company, we've got a very high-powered customer base, and I'll come back to why that is important down the track in meshing together and explaining our strategy. So 80% of our revenue is from repeat clients, and you can see from this portfolio of clients that we get exposed to the latest technology and certainly to the latest thinking of these often thought leading organizations. So if I take you now to talk about our competitive advantage. So our competitive advantage is basically predicated on four major planks. And one is our strategy. The second is our customer base. The third is our entrepreneurial nature, which has been with us since we started the company back in 1996, and also our high-end engineering capability. So if I just sort of talk through those things around, I'll just get rid of, I've got this thing which is sitting right in the middle of my slide. I'll just get rid of that. So our strategic R&D is, as we work with these companies, we see universal problems, and we try and develop universal solutions and develop the IP. So we're responding to real life problems within that customer base, which I previously showed you. And we run a filter over that, over the opportunities that we think are there to create some IP. And in particular, we like to focus on the environmental side of our customers' business and see how we can make them more environmentally friendly. And we focus on their environmental sustainability, or taking them on a journey the journey to a low carbon future. And we also like opportunities which are responding to cities of the future around rail, tunnels, and that sort of thing. And then we look for the ability to be able to replicate the solution on a global market by working with our customers in this way, we get a deeper understanding and we get access to their IP, and it becomes a virtuous circle. So that's our strategy, and that's our competitive advantage. You can't replicate our strategy if you don't have our customer base, and you don't have our entrepreneurial bent, and you don't have a high-end engineering capability. So it's interesting. I think it's a very robust strategy, and it's feeding off some really significant companies, which obviously have very, very significant balance sheets and R&D aspirations. So just to touch on a couple of our technologies, which have followed the model that I've just described in terms of developing the opportunities. So one is the CDP, and that stands for composite dry powder, and the other is CTS, which stands for custody transfer system. So I'll just nick to this next slide. So there's a lot of detail in there. I won't go to talk to that detail, but with these two technologies, we've taken the pragmatic view that we believe that LNG is it's a transition energy, and it's something that we just have to face up to, that there's LNG and other carbon intensive energy sources are going to be with us for some time. So we think that there's an opportunity to make the LNG production, measuring, whatever, a lot more efficient and a lot more energy, a lot more environmentally sustainable. So we'll just start with the CDP. So what is CDP? And I'll just flick to this slide here first. So CDP is a treatment of hydrocarbon drilling fluid. So drilling fluid is pumped down behind the drill bit as it traverses through the earth, and it flushes out the displaced earth. It cools the drill bit, it adds lubrication, and it's an essential part of any well. And so we had this opportunity where we could see that the traditional way of dealing with the drilling mud is very environmentally unfriendly. So just to describe what it is that the drilling mud does. So if you take the picture on the right-hand side there, that's drilling mud in its raw form. It's a very sloppy mud. It's a formulated mud with some chemicals in it. It doesn't have to have chemicals in it, but sometimes it does. So our technology takes that drilling mud and processes it through, that's one of our machines there, and within 4 to 6 hours, maybe 8 hours at most, it turns it into that central soil example there, right there, if you can see my mouse moving that. So we take that drilling mud, and within 8 hours, it turns into that material there, which is then becomes a resource. So we're taking what was a waste material, and quite a difficult waste material to deal with, and we're turning it into a resource in the building material. So that's what CDP does. So let me just go back here. So the CDP story thus far is, we started investigating this in March last year. We did some preliminary investigations. We appointed some experts in China, some legal representatives in China. The technology was developed in China, but it was on a very, very small scale. So we've worked with Green-tech to scale up this technology. We provided them funds to do that. We've signed an MOU which maps out how the business would develop and what that would mean for a acquisition and owning the technology outright. That's all been bedded down, and it's in the MOU. So another key point, which I suppose a story I'd like to let you know, is that we've lent them, they had a facility of $1 million to develop the technology. They have executed numerous wells. It's now commercially proven. The technology is accepted by the 2 major state-owned enterprises in China. They have been paid for the work that they've done on those commercial wells. They have returned a tranche of money back to us as we agreed, and we have also agreed to extend the loan a little further while they develop some other possibilities in terms of market. So what that shows is we've proven that we can have capital flow into China, and we've proven that the technology is commercial and can generate profits, and we've proven that the capital can flow out of China back to us. So that flow of capital is really important, and it was certainly a significant risk that we identified at the start of this process. We're very comfortable with that now. So where are we now? We are negotiating some strategic alliance agreements with the state-owned enterprises, two of the major state-owned enterprises in China, and that's the story on the Chinese operations. The story on the Australian operations is that we have engaged with the Australian operators, and they have very similar challenges as to what the Chinese had. So we're actually mapping the Chinese experience, 12 months behind in Australia here. And again, we're becoming more comfortable that the issues that we're finding in Australia will be dealt with by the Cdp technology. So it's been a pretty good story from my point of view. We have progressed really well. Our relationships are strong in China. We've got people on the ground there, of course, doing due diligence and so forth, as you would expect. And yeah, it's going along quite nicely. So not much to say to this slide here, except to say that's the scale that we first saw this thing operate on. This is at 5 litre scale. We're now operating at 6,000 meters cubed and 10,000 meters cubed. So it's a very, very scalable technology. That's one of the early prototypes, that machine there. And it's developed since then. So that's one of the things that we identified very early. It's a huge market and it's very scalable. So how big is the market for Cdp? For the Chinese operations, China is more and more wanting to be energy independent. And so they have a very aggressive drilling program for the methane production. And they're looking to drill in excess of 10,000 wells over the next 18 months or so. So if you then apply out the, we can process for about $400,000 per well, thereabouts. So if it becomes a huge market in excess of $4 billion. Obviously, we won't be able to do that, but we're going to do our best to get as much of that market as we possibly can. So again, coming back to our strategy, we want major markets in any technology that we're developing. In Australia, coming back to the Australian experience, these are two graphics that show the Australian exploration that's going on now. And on the left-hand side, the organisations that are actually doing the exploration. So we are already working, again, through our engineering business with the vast majority of the people doing the operations and the exploration. So this is a demonstration of the melding of the engineering into our technology development via relationships, pre-existing strong relationships with our customer base. So coming now to the custody transfer system, the custody transfer system of LNG is a technically difficult thing to do. It's at minus 160 degrees centigrade. It's a mixture. To get a homogeneous sample, it's a problem. The issues for the operators is that they generate billions and billions of dollars a year, and so if they're only out by a small percentage, it costs them a lot of money. And so we developed know-how around very precise determination of heat capacity within LNG. And we've now applied that to a growing market in the marine industry, the bunkering fuel. So I'll just move on. And this slide here just shows that we've worked on every LNG facility in and around Australia. And that's sort of where we, again, demonstrate working with our clients, being able to show our clients that we're very competent engineers, but we can solve the problems that they have. And so right now, there's a big problem in the marine industry in that the the maritime industry, the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has applied a very stringent reduction in sulfur emissions. And so the maritime industry is now maneuvering for a lower emission solution, and they either can put scrubbers on their exhaust, or they can move to LNG. And so we've taken our land-based custody transfer system, and we're now developing a marine-based custody transfer system in partnership with a major owner-operator of LNG carriers. And they're European based, they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and they're working with us to develop this breakthrough application of our CTS technology. And so how big is this opportunity? Well, the DNV, which is a major international organization, they have come out in the recent past and said there's about 184 LNG fueled vessels on order, and there's about 170 already running around. And Shell are now getting in on the act, and they're starting to really move to the LNG bunkering. But again, the metering of LNG accurately is a universal problem, but we're confident that in partnership with our partner, we can solve that problem. And so we think this is a major trend in the maritime space. So just talking at 100 miles an hour, but to sort of give major opportunity for you to ask questions, just to go back and look at our milestones that we've got coming up. So I think by the end of this calendar year, we will have the CTS system will be commercialized, and we will have that running around on ships in partnership with our partner. The CDP is progressing very well. The technology is proven. The Australian operators are certainly embracing the idea. We understand that we have to replicate what we've done in China in Australia. Anything that's done in China is somewhat discounted, mainly because of the tyranny of distance. So we're confident that we have a roadmap which will be able to prove the value to the Australian operators of the CDP. We also have some other very, very preliminary technologies around reducing our clients' environmental footprints. And we hope to be making announcements over the next short term, maybe the next 2 or 3 months, of how those are going. And our partners, again, we're partnering with some major operators in Australia to roll that out. So I think our path is very clear. Our milestones are very measurable. The way forward to us is we're unwavering in how we're going to do that. And most of all, I think we have the support of our customer base, which I think you would agree is very got very strong balance sheets and great desires to improve their environmental credentials. So I think that's probably about all I wanted to say in a forum like this for us. Happy to take questions either now or give David Harris, my CFO, or myself a ring into the future. We love talking about our company, and I think if you see if you look at our history of our announcements, we're very open, and we plan to continue on that vein. So Nadine, I think if there's nothing more from me, if you want to
Michael, we do have some questions that have come in from the audience. I'll start with this one. Given your focus on technologies which service the fossil fuel industry, how is Cinetec positioned to benefit from the rise of renewables and the global transition to greener energy sources?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad question. So there's no doubt that our customer base recognise the need to transition to a low carbon future. So with their balance sheet, and hopefully with our intellect, we'll be able to investigate opportunities for pushing that forward. I think the ESG movement and the financial reporting that's coming with the ESG movement is really going to play to accelerate that, which we then think we become part of that reporting through the initiatives and the money and the impact on their financial statements. So I see that while we are predominantly working in a, potentially with the oil and gas majors, I think that presents us a huge opportunity, because I don't see that someone like Shell is going to go out of business as we transition to a low carbon future. Shell will just reinvent itself. It'll apply its balance sheet to developing technologies. And I think we're well placed to be part of that.
The second question that's come in is along that renewables theme, saying, can you tell us about your exposure to renewables through your existing client base and how that experience guides your assessment of potential additions to your tech development portfolio?
Okay. Our existing client base, for instance, well, we've announced that we have a project right now with Beon Energy, working with Melbourne Water. Melbourne Water has been a long-term client of ours, and Melbourne Water, believe it or not, at their Eastern Treatment Plant, the majority of their energy consumption comes from capturing the gases which come off as the sewage is treated. So Melbourne Water is keenly aware of their responsibilities and the community's expectations. So the Beon Energy project is a major solar installation on two of Melbourne Water sites, and we are doing the high-end automation and IT rollout for those sites. So we are getting exposed to what probably is going to be one of the major end games in the moving to the low carbon future, and that's solar. And that's a demonstrable example there. And there's other examples which we're working on, which we will leverage our experience working with Melbourne Water into the future with other customers as well.
Another question has come in saying, are you still looking to acquire the IP from Green Tech? And if so, when will this occur?
Yes. The answer to that is absolutely. This was mapped out in the MOU, which we signed in June last year. And so one of the major triggers for us to go into a formal due diligence process, mind you, we've been doing that obviously as we go, but the formal due diligence process will start when we're able to sign up one of the strategic alliance agreements with either one of the major state-owned enterprises in China. And that then will trigger at our discretion whether we choose to acquire Green Tech outright, including the IP with that. I would say that it's pretty certain that if they sign up a strategic alliance agreement, then we will be moving forward at pace at the executing the MOU and all the conditions within the MOU.
Another question, how scalable is the engineering consulting side of the business? Is the business growing or is it at a steady state?
The business is growing. It's growing very quickly. There's no doubt that COVID really knocked us around, but we took the COVID time to really hone our strategy and develop our systems so the engineering business is scalable. I can say that we have, in the last 4 weeks, appointed, and some of them are yet to start, an extra 12 people. So the engineering component of the business is coming out of hibernation after COVID, and the pent-up demand in our target industries is it's significant, and again, that part of our business is certainly growing.
Another question saying, from my understanding at present, the mud is treated and then buried. How does the cost of business as usual compare to the cost of engaging your service?
This is a very right on point for us right now. So take the Chinese experience, the cost to process right now is about 410 RMB per tonne. We can do it for significantly less than that. And sorry, the second part of that question, Nadine?
How does it compare to the cost of engaging your service?
Yeah, it's at least 20% cheaper. But the Chinese, believe it or not, it's a common misconception. The regulatory requirements in China in many ways are more stringent than in Australia. So the real benefit is there is a direct cost benefit straight up. And there's a time benefit as well, because we can process and get the mud off-site very quickly, as opposed to, you can't transport the mud when it is in a liquid state. It's got to be shovel loaded. If you can load it with a shovel, then you can move it. But as you could see from the photo, it takes a long time to dry, and sometimes in certain conditions it will never dry because it's wet or it's humid or whatever. So it sits there and it becomes a real problem and becomes a legacy problem. So we have the benefit with CDP of very quick rehabilitation. But what the Chinese really wanted us, and the authorities really wanted, was they said, okay, it's great that you've got a technology which takes what was a waste and turns it into a waste that can be buried quicker. They're not really interested in that, because it's sort of like for like. They want to see a waste converted into a resource. And that's why we're getting the support of the authorities and indeed of the state-owned enterprises, because there's a lot of pressure coming on the managers to be able to not just turn a waste into a waste, but turn a waste into a resource. And this CDP does that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then a follow-up question from the same person saying, what is the cost of transport and logistics in moving the treated or solidified, the repurposed mud for sale? How much can the treated solidified mud be sold for?
We haven't in China. What we have done is we're not selling the treated mud. We're incorporating it into a building material joint venture where we supply the mud, and then we can value add to the mud and sell it as bricks. And the process, that is a cold pressed brick process. So again, the authorities in China really like this, because we're not using the usual high energy input manufacturing processes. It's cold pressed and it saves a lot of energy costs there, and of course the environmental footprint. So in terms of the advantages of CDP in transportation, they take, even just this is one of the things that we're really getting to learn in Australia, is that the authorities don't want trucks on the road. And they certainly don't want trucks on the road which are transporting a runny mud, because it's more difficult from handling a truck. And if you're on less than ideal roads, it becomes more dangerous, and the OH&S issues around that are significant. If there is a spill, it's more significant there. So in effect, the cost of transportation is significant when you take into account the whole life cycle, in that you can't transport it when it's runny, so you've got to let it sit there. You've got to do all sorts of things around if you do have to transport the runny mud, you have to use suction trucks, which they're not all that big. And if you're 200 or 300 kilometers away from a major town, you've got to bring all that infrastructure, as opposed to our technology, which you just put in a dump truck. It's a tipper, or indeed just a B double or something like that. It's a lot less. So in terms of quantifying it, we haven't done that work of the cost of transportation, but in terms of logistics, it's an obvious benefit.
Well, Michael, that brings us to the end of the questions that have come through today, but thank you so much for your presentation. And as you've said, I guess you're available for further questions via the contacts that are on the screen. Michael Carroll, MD and founder of Synertec. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye now.